It's time to change the conversation about mental health.
When you know something is wrong.
When you feel alone.
When you can't explain what hurts.
When every day is a struggle.
When you can't ask for help.
When your friend or family member seems fine on the outside,
but hurts on the inside.
Sometimes I feel as though I'm the only one that feels. But I know that's not true.
We can change.
We can change.
We can change.
We can make a difference.
There's power in our difference.
We can support each other.
We can fight stigma.
We say it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay to have a mental health condition.
We all want to feel heard.
To find hope.
And to live in a world without stigma.
Without discrimination.
And we are a force to be reckoned with.
I am not what happened to me.
I am how I overcame it.
Stand with us.
And discrimination in mental health.
You can see the person, not the condition.
You can build understanding.
You can play your part.
The conversation changes with me.
With me.
With me.
We are well-beings.
We are all well-beings.
WETA, with a coalition of partners, welcomes you to the Well-Beings Youth Mental Health Project. Hi, I'm Bill Pullman, and I'm honored to be with you as we launch this national campaign from public media. Well-Beings is a groundbreaking project at a very important point in time. Mental illness disproportionately affects our young people and the most disadvantaged populations among us. The growing mental health movement has set the stage for dramatic change, to raise awareness, to reduce stigma, to focus on prevention and early intervention, and the promise of more research for new treatments. Together, we can bring mental illness and discrimination out of the shadows, and it's not a day too soon. So thank you for being here today.
Today's LPB event will explore what parents and teachers need to know about the mental health of Louisiana's youth as they cope with life during COVID. From the loneliness and isolation of lockdown to the sadness of missed milestones, this conversation will identify the unique challenges young people are facing and offer valuable resources that move the discussion beyond awareness and towards recovery. Well-Beings, along with public media, will produce a wide variety of content through the multi-year campaign. Here are some PBS NewsHour student reporters from around the country to tell you more about it.
The signature documentary series in the Well-Beings campaign is Ken Burns Presents Hiding in Plain Sight, Youth Mental Illness, produced and directed by Ewers Brothers Productions and written by David Blistein. The film will explore through lived experiences the youth mental health crisis in our country. Currently in production, this 4-hour documentary film will air on PBS stations in spring 2022.
Wellbeings.org and #Wellbeings will be adding new content every week, including
Brave Teens, a digital feature-length documentary that offers a candid portrait of the lives of teens who have decided it's time to talk about their mental health challenges, to support one another, and to end stigma.
Out of the Dark, a short-form digital series that profiles the stories of 3 young people who faced the greatest mental health challenge of their lives and found strength they never knew they had.
Little actions make a big difference. A new animated series shares easy-to-use, science-based tools, actions, and tactics to support your social-emotional health and well-being.
And Tell My Story, a digital documentary in which a grieving father seeks answers after his 14-year-old son dies by suicide. He uncovers painful truths about the lives of teens, the impact of social media, and the shocking rise of depression among America's youth.
PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs engage high school journalism students as correspondents that report on youth mental health for more than 150 high schools across 46 states.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Andre Morrow, and on behalf of Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us for this live virtual conversation on coping through COVID, what parents and teachers need to know. This pandemic has affected all of us, but it seems to be hitting our youth, our young people, especially hard. And in Louisiana, there's also Laura and Ida, back-to-back Category 4 hurricanes that have pummeled parts of our state and made things even more stressful and difficult. Well-Beings in the PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs conducted a survey late last year, and the results are quite alarming. They talked with young people, including high school juniors and seniors and college freshmen and sophomores, and they found that 50% of those that they questioned said the pandemic had worsened their mental health. In addition, over 70% believe that COVID has disadvantaged their entire generation. 67% reported experiencing depression over the past year. And worse yet, 22% of those who responded said they would characterize their depression as serious. The CDC even found an alarming spike in visits to the emergency rooms for attempted suicide attempts. And this was in the months of February and March of 2021. And this was especially high among young girls. That's why LPB wanted to take part in this Well-Beings Tour event on youth mental health. We want to raise awareness. We want to address and help erase the stigma and give students, parents, the tools that they need, also school support staff, the tools they need to recognize young people who are struggling. This Well-Beings campaign was created by WETA Television, the public media station in Washington, D.C., along with wonderful national and local partners and sponsors. So we want to thank all of those who have participated locally and nationally for helping us shine a light on this very important issue. Now, if you're taking part in this virtual event and you are feeling yourself in a crisis mode at this point or experiencing thoughts of suicide, please, we'd like for you to text the crisis line, the crisis text line, or call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Those numbers, 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Both services are free and they're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, this is a sensitive topic, and to explore it, we turn to experts who know mental health and they know youth in Louisiana. So let's introduce now our panelists. LaShonda Williams is the executive director of NAMI Louisiana. NAMI stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness and is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. Ms. Williams, welcome. Also from NAMI Louisiana is Tatiana Gonzalez Quiroga. She was actually one of the founding members of NAMI on the campus of LSU and now serves as the advocacy and program director. Welcome, Ms. Quiroga. Next, we welcome Dr. Ariel Mitchell, who serves as not only a practicing counselor and therapist, but is also an assistant professor of counseling at Xavier University of Louisiana, and she is the immediate past president of the Louisiana School Counseling Association. Dr. Mitchell, welcome. And providing a most important perspective is a most inspiring young woman, Emma Benoit. She became passionate about suicide prevention after surviving her own suicide attempt while she was in high school. Her amazing story is chronicled in the documentary film. It's called My Ascension. Thank you, Ms. Benoit, for being here and sharing your unique and valuable perspective with us. Of course, we want to hear from you, the audience, as well. So please share your comments and questions on the Well-Beings or LPB Facebook pages, and we will do our best to make sure that our panelists see them and hear them and can answer them during this program, because you are a very important part of this conversation. So we heard those sobering statistics just a moment ago from the Well-Beings survey. Are we seeing anything on a statewide level along those lines? And why don't we get started with this question, and anybody else who wants to answer it? Ms. Williams, I'll start with you.
Thank you. So yes, we are seeing in Louisiana Louisiana is one of the top 5 states that has had a very high increase in anxiety and depression in our youth. This also comes along with all of the school closures and everything that they've had to deal with. So they're being isolated, which is causing them to be very anxious. Now they're trying to figure out how to get back into the classroom. It's also, we've also seen that there's an increase because even though we thought we were almost over everything, with the new variants coming out, we're seeing more quarantining, more students being at home, more teachers being out, which has caused them to not be able to talk to counselors like they used to. We've also had an increase in the numbers of calls that we receive from students from different schools looking for additional resources to help them during this traumatic time.
Anyone else want to join in? All right, let's move on to our next part of this discussion. And, we're focusing on COVID as a factor, but Louisiana, as we mentioned, has suffered through another major hurricane. There was Hurricane Ida just 3 weeks ago, Hurricane Laura 1 year ago. And so that just makes things even more complicated when you look at the scenario of that. So, Ms. Kroga, let me go to you. These kinds of natural disasters, they certainly cannot be helping anything with the struggles of Louisiana youth.
No, they can't. We know that usually following a natural disaster, we see an increase in anxiety and depression levels in young people, and combine that with like the unprecedented times that we're living in with COVID-19, having to evacuate, following COVID-19 protocols, remaining socially distance, and especially for people who unfortunately lost their homes, have to seek shelter. It is really a stressful time. And I think it's important to empathize with youth who can't really process those emotions like adults can. And, especially older young adults, excuse me, who relived kind of similar events to Katrina. And now as young adults are kind of reliving that same, fear that came with Ida, it's definitely taking a toll on the mental health of young adults and youth.
It uproots you emotionally, and as you mentioned, many people uprooted from their homes, driven out of their homes, living in hotels in different places, or out of school in some cases. So,
right,
it's
and
a whirlwind.
especially after, we have to think that, these students were quarantining all of last year, and this year they finally got to reunite in the classrooms, and within a month they already had to go back to, evacuating, and it's just a very weird situation that none of us have really lived through. So just imagining how that's affecting our youth is, really important to understand.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that, and before the hurricanes interrupted things, school was about to get started again. It was back to school, and there was a lot of focus on that, and people were thinking about vaccinations or having a test that would pass their school. But then the hurricanes interrupt that. But one of the things that has been a concern is something that I had never heard of before, but it's called re-entry anxiety. This was during the pandemic. It's a real concern of getting back into the situation around your classmates and around people. So, Dr. Mitchell, can you explain this phenomenon and why it's so difficult?
Yes. So re-entry anxiety is a real experience for people. I want to frame it in an experience that most of us have had, right? For the past year and a half, we've been fairly quarantined. We have worked from home. Children have been educated from home. People have minimized their outdoor experiences because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So then, fast forward to this school year, students are just expected to go right back into their school year like nothing ever happened, like they had not been home learning from the comfort of their own bedroom for the past year and a half. And so what you're seeing now is this experience of uncertainty, right, around what do I do now? How do I engage in school the way that I did before? Will I still have the same friends? Will my social circumstances change? And also the fear around, am I equipped to move forward in school? Because we have to remember that while educational systems have really shared their concerns around students being prepared after doing homeschool for a year, students are also concerned. They're seeing the difference in their grades, in the work that they're able to do, and they have their concerns. Parents have their concerns. So there are just a lot of spinning plates for our youth right now in returning to school that we need to, it all really comes together and form this perfect storm for what anxiety.
Dr. Mitchell, I would like to add on to what you just said. I've actually seen this firsthand. I have three children, and my middle daughter, before school started, she was so excited to go back to school. And as we got closer to that date, I just saw the anxiety in her. She was very anxious, the days before school. She started counting down maybe 5 to 10 days before school started. The day or two before school started, she just couldn't sleep. And I'm like, did you sleep at all? She would tell me, no, Mom, I was just so nervous. And she's only 7. So we've definitely seen that in our youth, even the younger kids as well. And as just being around many youth that are in school, I've seen even now there's some things that's happening in the schools where kids are so nervous that they don't know what to do. Sometimes they're actually faking illnesses, saying, hey, something is hurting, so I get to go back home, because I don't think they have completely adapted to being back in the classrooms after having so much fear and anxiety. They're just not knowing, as you said, what to expect. So we are definitely seeing that increase, just in kids, like I said, even almost faking symptoms just to get back home because they're not used to being in a classroom after so long.
Just hearing the reality that we're all facing, but that our youth are facing right now, it's a wonder that anybody can concentrate on anything and resume any kind of normalcy. That's one reason why communication, if possible, is so incredibly important. To share your feelings, to talk about things, to open up, just let it go, and tell anybody, tell your parent, tell your teacher what you're experiencing. Massive disruptions, that's been really obvious. We talked about that in our normal lives. And we hear kids talking about this, especially in their high school year and in this past year or so, kids missing graduation, for example, prom, a band program, certain sports disrupted during the pandemic. And adults sometimes might have some bigger day-to-day issues on their minds, so they might dismiss some of those thoughts that kids have, that this is really important. But Ms. Benoit, I want to turn to you and get your perspective on this, because this is an important time of life, as every time is for kids. And especially though high school, there's a lot more pressure as you're aging, growing up, and missing some of these events and being able to grieve that loss. That would be critical, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I unfortunately can't really relate to youth and stuff in high school these days because I've luckily graduated before COVID hit. But I can only imagine the struggle that they feel and the pressure that they feel. I know for me personally, going to school, I had anxiety. So I can only imagine the amount of anxiety that they're carrying with them going back into school and not knowing what it's going to look like, not knowing, really how to socialize in a group setting because you haven't all year. And I think something that I can really relate to that you said was the mask and wearing a mask. I know that when I was in high school, I definitely portrayed an image of perfection. And that was because I was ashamed of the way I was feeling. I was ashamed to have, anything but positive. So, but I think that the mask came from the stigma surrounding mental health, because growing up, I had always known that there was a stigma attached to mental health in general. And it was never something that was put on display or really exposed to me as a kid and growing up. So for me, when I started to experience anxiety and then my anxiety turned into depression, I was completely in the dark about it and was really just scared and fearful, and felt alone. So to, I guess, cope with that, I put on a mask and, made people think that I had it all together and that I was perfect, when in reality, I was actually hurting and really confused and just needed a lot of support and guidance. So like I said, I can only imagine what, the youth are going through right now, because when I was in high school, it was bad. And, to say that it's worse is, I can't imagine.
Tatiana, you want
Yeah,
to add
and I
something
can
here?
also, yeah, I'll piggyback off of Emma's comment. I think it's really important to understand that grief isn't just, losing somebody. Grief can come from missing out on these milestones. I can personally speak as a 2020 graduate from LSU. I personally didn't get to graduate, and just having that, moment taken away because of an historical pandemic is truly kind of a difficult thing to grasp. And I know that adults sometimes like to dismiss things like, oh, it was just prom, like it's just a dance. But that was something that was rightfully theirs, that, they should have deserved to have. And just to have that taken away, it does, it is an emotion that needs to be processed and not necessarily dismissed. Because I think when we start dismissing and when we don't listen to, the pain that's inside of, young adults and students that are missing out on these events, that's when we have those dangerous, recipes that, lead to unfortunate situations. So just understanding that grief isn't just losing, a person. It's losing those milestones that are pivotal to, your development as a person.
I wonder, is part of it because adults maybe have a tendency to think that young people are more resilient, that they can bounce back more quickly, even in this crucial part of their lives, even in this pandemic and all of the other things that are happening right now. So I wonder, would it be fair to say that the youth, kids, are already at an increased risk of having challenges, even without the other problems of the pandemic, of hurricanes, et cetera? Dr. Mitchell?
Yes, absolutely. So children, we have to remember they're not just little adults, even though sometimes we think of them in that way. They have not had the experiences. They don't have the coping mechanisms or the tools that we've developed over our lifespan to deal with the world events as they are occurring. And a lot of these things are happening for the very first time for them, right? And they sometimes don't know how to place this on within their own emotional process. So we have to understand that we have to give them the space to deal with and to grieve these situations, these events that they didn't get to have, graduation, prom, all of these things. And while, yes, they are resilient, we want to help them process that so that they can know how to handle experiences in the future that may go on in this way. And one of the things that I heard earlier, Andre, you said it, and I hear a lot of parents say this, that, we have, as adults, we have bigger things going on, because we think about it as we have to work, right? We have to pay the bills, put food on the table, all of these basic necessities that kids need to survive, like food, clothing, shelter, right? And so we tend to minimize the children's experience. And so I really challenge parents to understand that socializing, school, these experiences, this is the work of childhood. This is what they're supposed to be doing at this time. This is how they are going to grow and develop into these wonderful adult human beings that contribute to society, right? But we have to allow experiences and not minimize it because it's so far gone for us that we don't remember how important it was when we were 13 15 or 17 years old.
Yeah, Tatiana, you got some more to talk about on this?
Yeah. I was going to say, to kind of really put it into perspective, something that I found really astonishing was that Generation Z, our youngest generation, is actually the loneliest generation. So a lot of people tend to think as older people as, being lonely, the ones that need, constant checking in on. But it's really the young generation that's the loneliest, even though we are a generation that's really connected through social media and through different methods. There's more ways to communicate now. We still are the loneliest, and we're also the most stressed generation, which I know that's mind-blowing for adults to hear. Like, how can y'all be so stressed out, but it's true. We are the most stressed generation, and I think that really puts it into perspective that there are actual statistics to match all of the words that we're saying and why this conversation is so important.
Well, Ms. Benoit, I just want to ask you quickly, you mentioned masking earlier, that you wore a mask and kind of hid what you were feeling because you grew up knowing that it wasn't okay to talk about it. What do you wish the adults around you would have noticed about what was happening with you?
I wish, I really just wish that the adults in my life would have been more comfortable with themselves and being vulnerable, because the adults in my lives really were ashamed and kind of hesitant to even open up or be vulnerable around me. So that put a bad taste in my mouth when it came to vulnerability and opening up about your feelings. So that would be, I think, would be a game changer for me, is just them understanding that if they showed me, their vulnerabilities, and that it's okay to not be okay, firsthand, me seeing it from them, then I would have maybe taken that from them, that it's okay to open up and speak about what I'm feeling. And just the topic of mental health in general, I feel like was something that was so lacking in my childhood. It was never, like, I had never even really heard the words mental and health used together up until I came out of my suicide attempt. So, and that's mind-blowing to me, the fact that I had never heard that term growing up. So definitely just wish that they would have been more of, voices for me.
I guess, young kids grow up to be parents, and if they don't learn any different, they carry some of those same behaviors forward with them. Is there anybody else who wants to add to this?
Yes, I would like to add. Basically, I would like to piggyback off of something that each one of them said. So I'll start with Tatiana, Ms. Gonzalez. And when she said that their generation is more isolated, that is so true, because these newer generations, I mean, they're glued to cell phones, electronic devices, tablets, computers, laptops, where they don't sometimes know how to communicate as well, because they're so used to communicating through these devices that it definitely makes it hard to speak to someone one-on-one and in person. So that's one factor, and I have kids of my own, and I see it every day. And sometimes I actually have to tell them, put the phones down, put the tablets down, go outside, do something else, just get out, stop, staying in the room all day. So that I'm definitely seeing an increase just with all of the younger generations with that area. And then there was something Dr. Mitchell said as being more open and saying, okay, these are kids. They shouldn't be thinking about work or paying a bill. Their big event is going to a school dance or to prom or to their graduation. That is their life event. So as adults, we have to be more considerate and say, okay, that is a child, and this is where their focus is right now. So we have to allow them to enjoy that moment and not just brush it off like it's not a big deal or it doesn't mean anything, because to them it is a big deal. So as parents, we definitely have to be, more empathizing towards those situations as well, and understanding that they are kids. So what their life event, what seems to be a big deal to them may not seem a big deal to us as an adult or a parent, but we have to take the time and remember that. And then, as Emma also said, just communicating. we have to start these conversations and make it more comfortable for them to want to open up to us, because I think the older generations had that stigma for so long that I do believe it's very hard sometimes for the younger generations to open up. So we have to let them know that it's okay to talk to us. It's okay, to come to me as a parent or as a friend or go to someone else. These conversations need to continue happening. And I'm very happy to see that we are having more conversations when it comes to mental health right now, because it is such a big deal, and as we said, the children and the youth, they are our future. So we have to let them know how to deal with these upcoming events and things that's going to continue happening, because we know that this is not the last of what we're seeing right now. So we have to be able to prepare them and get them ready for the future.
Dr. Mitchell?
Yes. So I wanted to add just about the difficulty parents may experience in having these conversations with their kids, right? Similar to what was just said, a lot of parents grew up in a time and in a place where mental health was not a everyday discussion in the household. And depending on the cultural background, when you talk about therapy or counseling, that could even be taboo, right? That's just unheard of in certain cultures. And so we have to give respect to the parental history, understanding that everyone did not grow up in an era where mental health was openly accepted and we understood that this was something that needed to be tended to. So I really want to just encourage parents to, if this is where your perspective comes from, it's not too late to change it. You can shift your perspective now and just have that conversation with your children in an open space where they can just share with you, right? You may not have all the answers. You may not know the questions to ask, but you can be there to just hear them, to let them feel like in this space they're not being judged, right? And that they're not going to be in trouble for sharing what is going on with them mentally and emotionally. And then you are going to be there to help them find the supports that they need to move forward in their life. That is the best thing that parents can do if they don't already have the skills to help their children with mental health.
So communication, big, 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 big. And how do we recognize that a young person is struggling? Ms. Williams, you could start this, but I know everybody could say something about this.
So yes, so especially in the youth, we're going to see just changes in behavior. Sometimes it may be sleep patterns, eating patterns. Their appetites may change. We see them lashing out at loved ones from time to time. Actually, the ones that are in school, we may see a decline in grades. Where they're not focusing as much anymore, as well as the young adults who may be in college. They may stop going to class, so we may see class attendance decreasing. There's just so much. Some may have suicidal thoughts. There's just a whole list that I can keep going on, but if somebody wants to chime in, they can.
Sure.
Yeah, I can add to that, just from my personal experience. I lost my train of thought. Get back on tracks. Hang on.
You're talking about from your personal experience and the struggle, recognizing the struggle that.
Oh, yes. Yes. So my personal experience, something that I at the time didn't realize was a cry for help. But looking back now, it clearly was. So growing up my entire life, I was a cheerleader. Cheerleading was the only sport that I had ever done. It was my number one passion. I never didn't like cheerleading. I always loved going to practice. So I guess a big sign for my peers and my family could have been the fact that my senior year, I didn't try out for the cheer team. I had completely given up that passion, lost interest in it, and just really lost all of my confidence. Didn't think that I was good enough or equipped enough or you name it. And so I just completely quit that sport. And with that, also had no interest in looking into any colleges because it was the summer going into my senior year. I should have been looking into colleges and things like that, but I had no interest in any of that. And honestly, anytime anyone would ask me what my plans were after graduation and stuff, I would laugh because it was honestly comical to me, because that was just it. I had no desire, no will really for any type of future, because all my life I have been petrified of the unknown and terrified of the future. So that, I feel like, looking back, my parents definitely can say that that was a sign that they should have picked up on, for sure.
That's so tough to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that. Ms. Williams?
And yes, I can add just a few more. So there's, you may see kids become more isolated. They don't want to interact with family or friends as much. So, we can definitely see additional signs and symptoms in them. Again, with the just isolation, the anger, they just become more angry, and there's also, like she said, the things that you used to love, they don't have that desire anymore. So those are definitely some additionals.
Who else?
I guess it's important to know that, each person has different signs. So a sign for one kid will be different from another. So it's really important, you know your child best, when something is off. And I think as soon as you notice a change of behavior, ask them, because it's never too early to ask if they're okay, but it's sometimes, unfortunately, it can be, too late. And I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to suicide, they think that asking if, someone is suicidal will implant suicidal thoughts in their head, but it's actually the opposite. So if you ever notice your child is, suicidal, it's really important to ask them, like, are you having thoughts of suicide? Because that's not going to put, thoughts of suicide in their head. It's actually going to get them to open up and realize, oh, I'm being heard. I think that's something that is really important to leave, off with this conversation. It's just, having that brave, vulnerable moment to ask, are you okay? I've noticed that you've been off. This is not how you normally act.
Yeah. Dr. Mitchell, I'm curious, what have you seen in your practice? Dr. Mitchell? Can't you hear me? Okay, maybe we don't have that audio right now. Well, it's obvious that the struggle is real. We're hearing that sentence after sentence, remark after remark. So what can we do about it? LPB and Well-Beings have put together a really useful resource toolkit. And here is one of our supporters. I've got more on that. Plus, I've got details on how you can share your story on the Well-Beings Story Wall.
LPB, along with Well-Beings, has created a resource toolkit to help you or someone you care about find mental health resources, both nationally and right here in Louisiana. This mental health resource toolkit can be found at wellbeings.org/LPB-resources.
The We Are Well-Beings Story Wall is a central part of the wellbeings.org website, social media platform, and the Well-Beings National Tour. We are asking the public of all ages to submit personal reflections, videos, photos, and short stories to offer hope, to foster understanding, to build community, and break down stigma.
What does being well mean to you? What is the one thing you wish people knew about mental health? What is your passion? What's your story?
Video can easily be submitted via social media using the hashtag #wellbeings or emailed to info@wellbeings.org.
Stories can also be submitted by uploading to Dropbox and live at Well-Beings Tour events. The We Are Wellbeing Story Wall is made possible through generous support provided by Wellbeing's Youth Mental Health Project founding corporate sponsor, Otska, and Wellbeing's media partner, People.
There's a wide variety of resources in that toolkit, including ways to access on-campus resources at many of our colleges and universities, because there is help out there. Again, you can find that at wellbeings.org/LPB-resources. And don't forget, if you've got any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat and we will share them with our panelists. Now we'll go back to our conversation now. Many times we see mental health issues go hand in hand with substance abuse. This can be at any age, but it certainly is the case with our youth. So, Ms. Williams, I would suspect this is something that the NAMI chapters across the state are very familiar with.
Probably more than 50% of youth that are diagnosed with mental illnesses also have a co-occurring substance abuse issue. And the problem is that, first off, I think drugs are more easily accessible, and especially the younger generation, they're more willing to try more drugs and different drugs as well. So we definitely see an increase in not only the mental health side, but also with the substance abuse as well.
Anybody else?
Yes, and like LaShonda, yeah. I can add something. So like LaShonda said, drugs are becoming more accessible on college campuses, and even younger kids are actually trying drugs at quicker rates than, what was normal back then. I think that's really important to understand and have those open conversations with your child about the dangers of drugs, because unfortunately now more than ever, they're becoming laced with really potent substances and kind of getting, a lot of people might try drugs to kind of numb certain pains and try to, escape from a certain reality. And, we see it all too often that, that leads to death. So it's so important right now, especially to have those conversations about it's just not worth it. Taking those drugs, trying to numb that pain is not, it's not worth it at the end. So we definitely see that. And especially, like LaShonda said, if you have a mental illness, it's more of a, you're more likely to use substances just because you are trying to find a quick way to kind of relieve what you're feeling.
Thank you. Emma, you've got something to say on this.
Yeah, just want to quickly add that I feel like there is a stigma surrounding the drug, I don't even know what to call it, but I feel like there's a stigma surrounding substance abuse. And so that like, I feel like if the stigma's on both mental health and substance abuse. So I feel like anytime that, this is just from my personal experience, but anytime that, there's someone that is struggling and using substances to cope, I've experienced that people just have written them off as, something negative and not really looking at it for what it is. So I think that understanding that mental health and substance abuse do go hand in hand can maybe help whenever it comes to, trying to break the stigma and fight suicide and mental health as a whole.
You're saying that, and we're talking about back-to-back hurricanes, the pandemic, of course. So we're in this vice grip of stress, a constant state of being in a state of urgency, but we're not necessarily certain of what's going to happen next. So that would take a toll on anyone's coping mechanisms, certainly those of children. So let's talk about coping mechanisms and what could be healthy outlets other than just discussing things. Dr. Mitchell, do you want to pick up the discussion there? Is she hearing us? I wonder if we lost her again. Oh, we're not hearing her right now. Okay. Why don't we, somebody else, want to pick that up? We'll try to get you squared away in just a moment, okay? Ms. Williams, you want to pick that up?
Yes. So a big thing I know that we have been honing on and teaching individuals is self-care, how to do things that are meaningful to you, whether it's, especially with the kids, if we can get them doing some type of hobby or after school activity that they may enjoy, but just getting them to do things that they actually like doing. So getting them involved more in school. Not only that, but at home, there's things that can happen as well. You know, maybe having a movie night with your family, just something that kind of takes the attention off of all the bad things and negative things that are going on, and try to bring some positive energy into the homes and with the children. So just getting them to do some things that they like. Get out, let's go ride bike. Let's just have that more family time, seeing them enjoying their family where they're not focusing so much on all of the bad things that are happening, trying to just get their minds off of all of the things that are happening. I know we have no control over it, but it's very nice to see the families getting more involved as well. So for me, like I said, a big one is the self-care, just trying to do more things that are self-fulfilling.
Yeah, yeah. And Dr. Mitchell, we're working on your audio. We want to get you back as quickly as we can. Emma, I know that you're an advocate for a peer-to-peer suicide prevention program that's called Hope Squad. So, I mean, just hearing that gives me hope when I hear that. So I want to hear more about that. Emma?
Documentary on my ascension. And can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Okay. So I learned about Hope Squad about a year into filming the documentary My Ascension. And Hope Squad is a peer-to-peer resource group that is implemented in schools. It started in Provo, Utah, by a former principal, actually. And he was just seeing, the devastation and suicide rates increasing in his community and wanted to do something about it. So he created Hope Squad, which, as I said, is a peer-to-peer support group that's implemented in schools. But the really cool part about Hope Squad is the fact that it is all peer-based. So Hope Squad members are nominated by their peers to be a part of the Hope Squad. So they're asked questions like who's trustworthy, who would sit with you if you were alone, things like that. And those students are actually nominated to be on the Hope Squad. And Hope Squad members can help any grade. So they're not solely for one grade. They're the entire school. And they do several events throughout the year. And the biggest thing that they're about is hope, obviously, but it's just making sure that no student is left behind and that everyone feels that they're not alone. And so that's why I decided to partner with Hope Squad, and I fully support and love everything that they stand behind. So if you're interested in learning more about Hope Squad or how you can bring it to your community, please check out Hope Squad online. I believe it's just www.hopesquad.com, and you can learn all about Hope Squad and ways to bring it to your community.
Yeah, we also have a wellbeings.org/LPP resources. There's more about Hope Squad there also. And LaShonda, I think you got some stuff to say about that too.
Yes, I was just going to say that I know that we have received many phone calls, as I said before, from different schools throughout the state. So we are actually wanting to know, or we're actually trying to figure out how we can get Hope Squad added to more schools throughout the state of Louisiana. We know how successful Hope Squad has been, and we definitely want to see this in more schools to give more hope to not only the students, but the family members, the parents, and just getting more, getting that talk out there, getting those peers to be able to interact, and getting more youth involved in the mental health world in general. So that is definitely something that we would love to see just spreading through the state of Louisiana as well.
Yeah, I agree. Dr. Mitchell, we've got you back, so we want to hear your voice. Let's talk a little bit about school counselors being a fantastic resource for young people to turn to at the high school level. school counselors?
Yes, your school counselors can be a great ally in helping you deal with a lot of the events that are going on, not just your academics. Your school counselors can help you deal with the stressors. I know before I got logged out, we were talking about stressors as technology failed me, right? Which is one of those common stressors that people tend to deal with currently. But your school counselor can be a really great resource to help you and connect you with the right people, the right resources, the elements that you need to be successful. One of the current organization here in Louisiana is the Louisiana School Counseling Association, and you can actually find them online at louisianaschoolcounselor.com. And there you can also find resources that parents as well as other school counselors can locate different things that they may need in assisting their students. So we're all here really just to help the student be successful, but it's not just focused on academics. It's in life, emotionally, personally, and just all around helping them to be a healthy individual.
Dr. Williams, we were talking about coping mechanisms. That was during the time that we lost your audio. So wanted to have you talk about some of the coping mechanisms also.
Yes. So when you talk about coping skills with our youth, you want to remember, like we said earlier today, developmentally, they are not little adults, right? So they don't have the benefit of the years or wisdom or experiences with things that we've gone through and have learned how to deal with. So some of the coping mechanisms really that are really useful for our youth, and I know I'm going to say this and people are going to like look at me funny when I say this or look at the screen funny, but you have to disconnect. That's number one. In this day and age of uber connectedness, right? We are so connected that we're still isolated, but we're so connected. Sometimes you have to just take a step back and be in the present moment. And being in the present and just living in that space, it assists you with dealing with anxiety or even stressors that may be going on, right? Because anxiety a lot of times focuses on the unknown of the future. And so being in the present, you can't really think about the unknown of the future. You're focused on right here and right now, right? And then also utilizing your resources around you, friends and family that you can speak with and you can have open dialogue with and share information that you may feel contribute to your stressors. They may also be able to help you through that. And of course, seek out counseling, right? Find someone that can help you be the best you that you can be. So those are just three little things that that our youth can start with as far as coping mechanisms, and then work from there.
Well, Emma, let me ask you about coping mechanisms. I don't think we can talk about that enough, actually. Let me hear more from you on that.
Yeah, definitely. All the coping skills and mechanisms that were said so far are all things that I use in my daily life, actually. And so it's great to hear that, they are coping mechanisms that are being told. So, but one that I rely on pretty much multiple times a day is reflection. I like to, because for me, like I will be in a situation and see no light to the end, see no greater horizon. It's really hard to think positively when you're in a situation that's not positive. So what I do when I'm struggling is I just sit back and reflect on times when things were the way they were, and then see how they got better and see how I overcame that. And that really, it sounds so small, but it really has helped me overcome a lot of my anxieties and fears of the future whenever I reflect on my past and see how I've grown and changed through things. So that's the number one coping skill that I utilize on a daily basis. And then two, obviously, when she said, disconnecting, it's crazy because I use that as an advice to people that I'm like supporting and stuff, but I often forget myself too that I need to disconnect because, social media, while it can be a really helpful and useful tool, it can also be very damaging and toxic. So I suffer with that. So thank you for reminding me of that, Dr. Mitchell.
Ms. Kroga, you want to add to that? Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, I think something that also, I also have struggles with, anxiety, and I think that's something that I learned that I had forgotten about was having self-compassion for myself and allowing myself to also feel those emotions instead of just dismissing them and saying, let's move on, we're okay. Having that self-compassion to realize, no, it's okay. You are upset. Like this was an upsetting event. Let's sit with these feelings and then explore them a little longer. Let's not just try to fix it. I think we live in a society where we're just fixers and we're so focused on, all right, you're sad, let's get ice cream, let's move on. But it's really important to kind of change that perspective and have self-compassion. And even as a parent too, it's, instead of just saying, I'm really sorry that kid or your teacher said something nasty, but it's going to be okay. Like, no, you should say like, I'm really sorry that, that teacher said something to you. I can't imagine how you're feeling. That holds so much more power and kind of empowers that youth to actually feel like they're being heard. I think that self-compassion is something that as a society we really tend to lack in. And it's something that I think if we all really work on learning, we can really kind of change the way that we talk about mental health and just talk about our feelings and kind of, lead these conversations in a better and healthier way.
Thank you so much for that. We've talked about NAMI a good bit, but I want to hear more about the chapters on college and university campuses across the state. And Alexa, Ms. Williams, Ms. Kroger, you can talk about that, but Ms. Williams, let's start with you.
Okay, so right now we have 4 NAMI chapters on campus. We have NAMI on campus with LSU, NAMI on campus with University of Lafayette, Louisiana. We have NAMI on campus at Tulane and NAMI on campus at Southeastern. And all of these NAMI on campuses, they hold their monthly meetings. They have peers there that are there to help other peers that come in need of any type of resources. And they sometimes have to direct them to our NAMI office for additional resources as well. But they are wonderful as they help to bring that awareness. They also want to end the stigma and let people know that they are not alone. So they are there to provide those resources and support to individuals on the campus that may be struggling, and they tell their stories on how they overcame certain situations. I'll kind of let Tatiana chime in, as I know she was the founder of NAMI on campus at LSU.
Yeah, so it was such an honor to help, establish that club on campus. Unfortunately, when I was in high school, I lost 2 of my peers to suicide within 48 hours of each other. That really opened up my eyes to see that we don't talk about mental health when it comes to high school students and youth, and that there is such a lack of awareness that we really need to bring. And I remember, in high school summer, I would attend the council meetings in St. Tammany, go to NAMI St. Tammany meetings and just say, what can we do? Like, what is the change that we need to see to get this conversation started? So I was really fortunate. I had a peer reach out to me and say, I'm interested in starting NAMI on campus. Do you want to be an officer? And immediately I was like, yes, this is what we need at LSU. And I will say, when we first started, it was a rough start. I remember we would table outside and people would say, I don't have mental health. What are you talking about? And, I recently went to one of their meetings and it was just an honor to sit in front of 26 students. When we first had a meeting when I was a freshman, there was 6 people and half of them were my roommates. But just the way that this club has been able to change the culture of mental health at LSU, I can only speak for LSU's, but I know our other on campuses are doing great. But just to see the impact that NAMI on campus has actually physically had on LSU's campus and how we have been able to generate a mental health movement at LSU has truly opened up my eyes, and I'm just so proud of it. And like LaShonda said, we have so many across the state, and if you're ever interested in starting one, you can always email us and we would be more than happy to get you established on starting a NAMI on campus at your university.
I'm curious, what kind of, how many students are involved, say, at LSU or Tulane or UL Lafayette? How large are these chapters?
And I would say it really depends on the university. So when I first started, freshman year, we had like 6 people attend, and it was mainly our roommates. But as we kind of grew and established it, and we told people, hey, it's okay to have these conversations, we are having people like over 30 people attend meetings, and then they spread it to their friends who want to attend meetings, because mental health, it affects everybody, everyone, whether you have a mental illness or not. You're going to feel the effects, whether it's your family member who has a mental illness, your best friend. So it's so important to be equipped with that toolkit to understand, what mental health is, and just become aware of it. And I think that NAMI on campus, really does that, and it really helps to shine a light on mental health, especially in colleges, because unfortunately, mental health in college, it's a stressful time for everybody, and especially with the pandemic, it's even more of an important time to discuss that.
I'm hearing us talk about again, communication and being open and learning and being told things and being able to talk to your teachers, parents, counselors. Dr. Mitchell, though, I'm curious, why don't we talk to high school students about mental health? Or are we seeing that happen some?
So that's an interesting question. The reality of it is that we do, but not in the amount that we would like to see. So your professional school counselor that's on campus, they are torn in so many different directions as far as what their requirements are for the school, what the requirements are for the state. They're pulled to do testing and data and all of these things. But the reality of it is that they want to spend their time focused on engaging with the students individually, doing classroom guidance to make students more aware of mental health, of their own concerns, and just really helping them to find the best ways to deal with the experiences that they are having as they matriculate through their high school years. So really it's a time constraint. But I will say, as an organization, the Louisiana School Counseling Association, we have been advocating with our stakeholders and leadership to allow school counselors the time to focus more with kids on mental health, because the reality of it is that if the student is not healthy mentally, then they're going to suffer academically. And so we need to be able to focus on both, not just one or the other.
I mean, it's important to note that most colleges have mental and behavioral health resources on campus. But again, is the high school scenario, is it because, I'm not sure exactly, is it more of a time issue, there's not enough time, or the age, or it's just something we haven't gotten to? But if you look at the statistics and you look at what's going on around us, it seems like it might be time to have a bigger influence of that. Somebody want to talk about that?
Absolutely. I would like to just add as well that not just focusing on it in high school, the time is extremely early to talk to kids about their mental health. In elementary school, right? Kids need to know when they're feeling something, how to express their emotions effectively, as well as how to deal with that internally, right? What does that mean? What we see is that children internalize situations and they hold it in. So then by the time they express it, it comes out negatively. It comes out in behavioral issues or concerns at school, or what was shared earlier, they project it onto their family or friends. And so this starts early. This isn't something that just happens once students cross that threshold from middle school to high school. These are all learned behaviors, learned coping mechanisms that we can really start helping children with as early. And so it is an early, much needed conversation and continued conversation throughout the lifespan.
Anybody else? You have the opportunity to talk to schools and of when would be the appropriate time. Emma, what would you tell the schools if you had that chance right now? And you do.
What would my advice be to students at school?
Well, no, I mean to really establish. establish programs that would be how early? You know, we were talking about high school, college, and high school, and then we're like, well, wait a minute, kids have feelings when they're 7 years old, perhaps. So
I definitely, I definitely agree that it needs to start as early as kindergarten, and that's the magnificent thing about Hope Squad is that they have Hope Squad programs for high school, middle school, and elementary school. And Hope Squad again is really amazing because the students are actually trained on like different scenarios, different things, and so they have a little bit of education when it comes to mental health, but they also know when to take it to an adult and when to take it further than inside Hope Squad. But Hope Squad is definitely something that I think needs to expand in Louisiana, being that it is only in one school, Letcher High. It definitely is needed, I think, all over the state, but absolutely as early as kindergarten, because you don't realize that identifying emotions really can be a helpful tool in maintaining your mental health, because that's something that I unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to have growing up, was that education or understanding of my own emotions and my own feelings. So had I at a young age understood, hey, I'm feeling frustrated, or hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed, had I understood that, it might have been different. So and then with that, once you're able to identify what you're feeling, you're able to, I do a 3-step process. I identify what I'm feeling, I discuss what I'm feeling, and then I work on a resolution of what I'm feeling. And that works for me, and I know it works for others as well, but definitely young is when it should start the conversation.
Yeah. Emma, thank you so much. I want to go back to the CDC statistic about the rise in suspected suicide attempts. And the statistic is especially around teenage girls. Why would there be a difference between teenage girls and boys? Anybody pick that up? Tatiana?
I know that somewhere I read a study on the way that social media has impacted, especially younger women. We're starting to see a lot of different things like filters that kind of distort your image of what you're supposed to look like, trying to fit in like somebody else was, how they look. That is really taking a lot of stress on younger women, especially. And somewhere I read that even limiting your social media use to just 30 minutes a day can have significant reduction in your anxiety and depression levels. But I think that, social media can play a really dangerous game, especially when it comes to things like suicide, because you're constantly trying to portray yourself to be like someone you're not. And you, like Emma said, that mask that you're putting on, it's quite dangerous. And it's something that, we need to talk about too, just how negative social media has become. And especially with the filters and all of that you can put on and look entirely different. It's something that is unfortunately taking a toll on a lot of young girls' mental health.
Dr. Mitchell?
Yes. So in society, I just would like to add that historically and traditionally, women and young girls have it the most difficult as far as the judgment of their looks, their being, the space that they occupy in this world. And so I think with that, and add on social media and that kind of constant connection of what I should be, what I should look like, what I should say, what I shouldn't say, I think that it definitely impacts our young girls more than anyone, than other sexes, just because unfortunately that's how society has been set up for so long. It is stacked against our young girls in so many ways, and girls are just expected to change with what's in vogue, and just kind of looking at all of these things that society brings in, and they say, okay, this is important, or this is the standard of beauty now, and then young girls are just expected to conform. I think those things add stressors to young girls. So you add in everything else that they're already dealing with, and then those societal pressures and expectations, it definitely would impact them a little bit harder.
Dr. Mitchell, what about kids, anyone with gender identity gay, you go there and that increases the odds even more so, it seems like.
Absolutely, because you have a situation where in some areas coming out as LGBTQ or transgendered is still fairly new. People are still grappling with what that means or how do I feel about that. And so as people are coming out with their own transitions and experiences, they don't know how they're going to be met because a lot of people in society are still trying to figure out where they stand on a particular concept. And so there's very specific struggles that our LGBTQ and transgender youth have to deal with that adds on exponentially to the stress of the pandemic and reentry anxiety and just socialization. It adds on, it compiles, and sometimes it's too much for them to handle when they don't have the effective coping skills or the resources to deal with what's going on.
Well, they may not even be understanding too what they're feeling. It may be so confusing. How do I even explain this? I think the floor is open to everybody to continue this discussion just about the male, female, and across the board. Emma?
Yeah, everything that Dr. Mitchell said was right on the money, honestly, when it came to social media, because I know from my personal experience in high school, social media was just so important. It was one of the most important things in high school society, right? So for me to not put up this perfect image and then go to school and that's the only thing everyone's talking about, it's really challenging. So, and two, I always, for me, the reason that I hid behind a mask and, it was such a big deal to me to portray this perfection on social media was because the only validation that I ever got was from my physical, right? So it was the only other compliments that I ever really received was, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. Oh my gosh, you're so pretty. You're so this, you're so that. And it was never anything about me as a person. It was always about my outer shell. So that was the only validation that I really got. So understanding that and knowing that, I felt like the pressure was up to constantly, go above and beyond to, demonstrate this perfect life. So that way I can maintain, this image to other people. And that was really toxic and very, very challenging for me to overcome after my attempt was learning how to see social media and use it in a better way and kind of filter my feed to be what I want it to be and not the glamorizedness of, this idealistic perfect life that everyone desires. And, too, with social media, it's becoming so much worse even after I graduated high school because, we're seeing that people are having full-on careers with social media. Literally, you could have a full career from Instagram. So it's so important to high school students and it's a big deal. So it's definitely one of the most crucial things in this entire conversation, in my opinion, when it comes to talking about the mental health of youth, really.
Lasanda?
Yes, and I would just like to add on to what Dr. Mitchell and Emma both said, especially with the social media. Social media and society in general has put such a higher standard, especially on females, that they're trying to live up to, that it definitely causes more problems. And also, I would like to say that growing up in the Black community, I know for myself, it was very unheard of, as someone mentioned earlier, that you spoke about mental illness or you were taught to seek treatment, go to therapy, get counseling. Those things were kind of unheard of. You were just kind of forced to deal with it and, toughen up, deal with it. It's life. Just keep moving on, without talking about what was actually the real issue. So again, that mask comes about because, especially I think as a young Black female myself, it was, you had to be strong. You couldn't I guess, show that sign of weakness. We weren't allowed to do that. It was not talked about that, to say anything about mental health was just not the norm. So, and again, as Dr. Mitchell mentioned before, I think it's because of how, like how you grew up or your parents' background and all of those issues. So that definitely causes more barriers to the youth, because sometimes I think as parents, we forget that, again, they're not adults, and we have to be more open and more acceptable about talking about mental health and letting them know that it's okay to not be okay. I know Emma said that earlier this evening, that we need to make that the norm. Let people know it's okay when you're feeling down. Express those feelings. Don't bottle them up. Don't try to make it seem like it's nothing when it is something. And I know Tatiana had mentioned before that we have to be able to express those emotions and be real about those emotions. So if you're upset, then say you're upset. If don't try to make it seem like it's nothing so it could just be brushed under the rug. Like, let us know what's going on, and we have to make it more convenient for the kids and the youth especially to open up to us and let them know that we're listening and they are not alone.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Dr. Mitchell, I've got this question for you, and it's a great question. COVID has forced everyone, but youth here, to face their mortality. Now, teenagers, they think they're going to live forever. Nothing's going to affect them, but COVID has changed that. So how is that changing the way youngsters are handling this or coping it, facing their mortality and those of people they've seen die?
Yeah. It's really creating almost a grim outlook or a sense of stress for our younger children, right? So the CDC has cited these kind of 5 common or most common reasons for death in teens, which is accidents, um, suicide, homicide, cancer, and heart disease. So we know those 5 are what typically happens when you see, or most commonly happens when you see someone in their youth that may die. Well, then all of a sudden, children are now seeing on the news or on social media a teenager that looks like them. They died at football practice, right? Tested positive for COVID. Something happened. They don't know. They passed away after dealing with COVID for 2 weeks. This was not something that they were prepared for. This was not something that they even conceptually understood that, oh, I could die from this, right? And so you give something unknown to someone that developmentally, they're still grappling with this idea that I'm going to live forever. But then you say, oh, well, wait a minute. No, there's something now out here that you've never seen before, that you've never heard before, and it can end your life just like that. That is a stressor that, I mean, I know a lot of adults that was not prepared to deal with that type of stressor or that understanding. And so again, we have to think about the development of children and how that stressor really can play a role in how they're moving forward through this pandemic and what that means for them.
Dr. Mitchell, thank you for that. A big part of this mental health initiative is the upcoming Ken Burns documentary. It's called Hiding in Plain Sight. It's scheduled to air on LPB in the spring of 2022. This film looks at experiences of young people living with mental health conditions with a focus on the importance of awareness and compassion. We've got a short preview. Here it is.
When you're a teenager, you're at a certain stage in your life where you're kind of like a beginner. It's kind of like a first try at everything in life. And when something abrupt, like someone dying from suicide, happens, it hits like a wrecking ball. Everyone is different. Very different. It's very difficult to understand what to do from there.
I never really got a chance to explore my identity until I moved here. The community here is so much more accepting. I started to wear more feminine clothes, started to wear makeup every day. It was good at first, but the day I went to school with pink hair, my car ended up getting vandalized and someone wrote queer on the back windshield. And there's a lot of non-binary kids that are depressed. It's not a symptom of being non-binary, it's a symptom of being marginalized by a society that doesn't accept us.
I think everyone thinks, not my kid. This won't happen to my kid.
The first time they ever found out, they found empty pill bottles in my bag. I think they just hoped that I was just testing things out. They grounded me and they took my phone away. It didn't do anything. It didn't matter how many consequences I got, nothing was enough to stop me from taking what I wanted. My life was gonna end one way, and that was being addicted to drugs, so why not start now?
I was sort of eating for comfort, and then I would get upset at how much I ate, feel ashamed, and I would have to find a way to get rid of it, and I would just exercise to burn off that same amount of calories. I would wake up in the middle of the night while my roommate was sleeping, and I would start working out. And that's sort of how it spiraled at first. I spend a lot of time in the grocery store when I go. It's overwhelming. You don't have to do drugs and alcohol, but you do have to eat. And you have to eat every day. So food is not really something that I can escape.
I think it's so hard to find an Indigenous person that hasn't dealt with mental illness or some sort of abuse. That's in me, that's within my DNA and myself, and that's something that I have to deal with. Why I wasn't taught my language was because it was literally beaten out of my great-grandparents. The things my ancestors went through, it's shown through alcohol abuse, addictions, non-stable families, toxic relationships. That's the burden that Indigenous youth deal with every day. You're just born into it. Birthright. So not only is trauma embedded in my DNA, but so is resilience. So I know for a fact that my ancestors and my elders, they're rooting for me and they want me to do good. I'll share my story over and over again. I'll go through, those emotions like a million times if it helps one person. In some ways it heals that little scar. It takes away from it.
And we'll let you know. I want to, again, thank everyone on behalf of LPB and the Wellbeings Tour curated by WETA. I'd like to thank our incredible panelists for being a part of this event. The discussion has been an important one, to say the least, I think. And also thank you to the national sponsors and the partners who have helped make the Wellbeings Tour possible. Please remember to visit the Wellbeings website at www.wellbeings.org/LPB-resources. You can there download the free Wellbeings Louisiana Mental Health Toolkit that provides local and national support resources. At wellbeings.org/LPB, you'll also find a short survey to fill out. Your feedback is essential and will help us provide more events on topics that you'll find important. Our discussion tonight is being recorded, and it will also be available at wellbeings.org very soon. Thanks to everyone. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for supporting LPB.